I would have said too if I were you. Let's look at problem 6 first of all. Oh no, that's sorry, wrong one. Let's look at problem. I guess we got to do either one of them. When you're asked to solve by factoring, children, okay, solving by factoring is when you use when it's a quadratic, when it's a 3-term thing. Okay. Step number 1 when we talked about doing this was you had to make it equal 0. Make equal to 0. So in this case right here, I need to move my 6n back over here because I want it to look like a normal trinomial. I subtract 6n. It doesn't combine with that, so I end up with this, correct? N squared minus 6n plus 5 equals 0. Are you with me? I just moved this 6n over here and I get it equal to 0 because I want to factor this trinomial. I want to do reverse distributive property. This is review, by the way. Let me remember none of this stuff. And remember, we factor a trinomial into 2 binomials. What times what gives me n squared? It's pretty simple on this side. What times what gives me positive 5 when added together gives me a negative 6. Boots?
One minus.
Correct. Negative 5 times negative 5 gives me positive 5. Negative 5 plus negative 1 gives me negative 6. That's my negative 6. We factored trinomials before. I could go back and show you the whole spiel before. We've done this before. And then it asked you to solve. This is factoring. To solve, I just want to know, because it has to equal 0, when will this be 0 and when will this parenthesis be 0? And this is pretty easy because what number when you subtract it from 5 gives you 0? 5. What number when you subtract 1 from that gives you 0? 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. 5 minus 5 is 0. Either one of these is 0. It gives the whole thing 0, which is what you want. So the letter N equals those 2 answers. We have done that before. Let's do one more just because Evan looks slightly perplexed. Okay, problem 3. I want to set it equal to 0, so what do I have to do? I need to add the 28 to this side and subtract the 11. Do the opposite because I'm going from one side of the equal side to the other. Okay, so x squared, I'm going to, we always put our x term next, so I'm going to subtract 11x and move that over here. So here's my minus 11x. I need to get my negative 28 over there, so I add 28. It doesn't combine with anything, and it sets it equal to 0. Yes? Then I factor this into 2 binomials. What times what gives me a positive 28 when added together gives me a negative 11, Gary?
Minus 4 minus.
Right, so I get x minus 4 and an x minus 7. They won't always be negatives, but in these last 2 cases they have. That is the factoring part. Now you need to actually solve that, which just means when will this be 0, when will that be 0, Evan? What number minus 4 is 0? So one answer is 4. The other answer is what number minus 7 is 0? 7. Those are your 2 answers. Can I say the word that was review again? Now, you need to take out a very blank piece of paper and write this down very specifically. I will try to go as super slow as I can because this is definitely one of those things that's not hard, but it's confusing if you don't follow the directions. Okay? And it's based on this. Okay, first of all, your title is this. Your title is Completing the Square. Okay, and it is based on this. Way back when we did the Pythagorean theorem, we had this. X squared equals 25. If x squared is 25, what does x equal? What is it? Why is that true? It does equal 5. Why is that true? Because just like in equations where you can multiply both sides by the same thing, add or subtract, you can take the square root of both sides of an equation. The square root of x squared, which is the square root of x times the square root of x. What do you get if you take the square root of x squared? You just get a x. And what do you get? What was that? What do you get if you take the square root of 25? 5. It's actually a plus or minus 5. That is the premise. That's what we're going to do, but this is a very, very simplified form of what we're going to do. Okay? The second thing this is based on is this. Okay? Well, let's just do, let me write the problem down and give you the steps. X squared plus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Now, I know what the answers are to this. I can do this just like the way we did up there and get the answers, but we're not going to. We're going to do a different method because the other method works for all things that you can do. So this is, even though you said, why would I do it this way? You're doing it this way to teach yourself how to do it right, the other way. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Okay. Smith, you just need to know how to do this completing the square thing. Okay, step number 1. Listen very careful, write this down. You got to do this nice and slowly. Okay. Move the just number to the other side, away from the x terms. Okay, in other words, unlike solving by factoring, where I want it to equal 0, I don't want this to equal 0. I want to get rid of this 21 and put it over there. So step number 1 is just going to be this. I'm going to add 21 and move the 21 over there. So now it's going to look like this. X squared plus 4x equals 21. Everybody happy with that? Okay. And then the wheels will fall off. Step 2. Take half of the coefficient. Don't jump off the bridge until I explain this. Take half of the coefficient of the x term and square it. I'll let you write that down and then I'll tell you it's not as hard as all those highfalutin math words sound. It's really easy. Okay. You are looking at the term in front of the x, not the x squared, the x. My coefficient, that's the number in front of the letter, is 4. You have to take half of it. What's half of 4? And then I have to square that. What's 2 squared? 4. Good. Okay. And then, along in this same line here, you need to add that to both sides. Oh, great. How did we end up short 25 times? Okay. So, now that means I do this. I took half of 4 and squared it and got 4. I need to add that to both sides. Okay, which means I end up with this. If it doesn't combine with these, it ends up making a trinomial again. X squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 25. Half of 4 squared was 4. I added that to both sides. It didn't combine with anything on this side, but it did combine. So Christine? We're not to the point yet. You can't ask me the point till we're all done. Okay. Step 3. Wait, I need a different color, do I not? Step 3. I don't like that color either. What color?
Green. Orange.
Step 3. Factor the left side into 2 binomials. Here, Christine, had you waited just a moment, is the point of that. When you do what we just did, okay, when you factor this left side, this is what we call a perfect square trinomial. In other words, you are going to get an identical binomial here. Okay, what times what gives me 4 when added together gives me positive 4? It's going to be x plus 2 times x plus 2. You have to get the same exact binomial here. If you didn't, you did something wrong, but it will. If you do this right, there's no other choice but to get that. Okay, you get x squared, x plus 2 times x plus 2. That still equals 25. And then, the crescendo of everything right here, step number 4, you are going to take the square root of both sides and solve. Which means this. I'm going to rewrite it just so you can see it. I've got x plus 2 times x plus 2 equals 25. I draw my little square root sign above those. What is the square root of x plus 2 times x plus 2? They're the same thing. So the square root of them is just x plus 2. Okay? These are identical. Just like x squared was x times x. What times what gives me this? I have 2 identical. This is the same thing as x plus 2 times x plus 2. If you have 2 identical square roots times themselves, you get whatever it is that's underneath that. It's just x plus 2. And then here's where you have to be careful. What is the square root of 25? Plus or minus 5. It's either plus 5 or minus 5, because negative 25 times negative, or negative 5 times negative 5 equals 25, as does that. Now, the last thing is to solve. To solve that, I have to get x by itself. I have to add 2. But you're going to get 2 answers because you have to add 2 for when it's plus 5, and you have to add 2 to when it's negative 5. These are your 2 answers, which are 7 and negative 3. Yes. Oh, sorry. Subtract 2 from both sides, so you get, wow. See, I did that just to make you feel like you were part of this. You got positive 3 and negative 7, sorry. Notice how that will not fit on a just tiny piece of paper. Now, like I said when I started here, kids, was this the one? Yeah. We could have done it like this up here and just said what times what gives me this binomial, trinomial. What times what gives me negative 21 added together gives me positive 4. Positive 7, negative 4, right? And guess what my answers would have been? When is this 0? When is that 0? What did we get for answers?
It's 3.
See? Perfect. 7 and 3. Wait. No, it should have been 7 and 3, look. It should have been 3. Sometimes 4 is 28. 3 should have been negative 7, positive 3. Sorry, kids. Okay. Ready? Slowly but surely, work with me here. We're going to do it all over again in slow, methodical steps.
Why can't you just do it? Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, I think
Because they don't all work out. This is for when you get the ones that are not factorable. For example, problem number 8, you can't factor that. What times what gives you 31 added together gives you 6? No answer. This is the way you solve it when there's no answer.
We can just write no solution.
Alright. So, what?
We can just write no solution.
No, there is a solution, that's the problem. You'd be right if there were no solution, but you're wrong, so there is a solution. So, here we go. Put your belly aching. I only teach you what stuff you have to know. I don't teach you because I want to. Here we go. I'm starting with this problem. Write it on your paper. If you look at your notes and follow them, you cannot go wrong. Work with me. Step number 1. I'll even do it in the same color. Number 1 was you needed to move this number to the other side. So to do that, I do what? Add 31. So now I get, n squared plus 6n. And if you want, you can leave this blank for now because you know you're going to put a number there. Equals 31. Stop me there if that didn't, that's just following the rules. Okay. Step 2 is probably one of the more complicated of it, but it's just this. The number in front of n, you cut in half, you square, then you add. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is. So now I'm going to add that to both sides. So I end up with n squared plus 6n plus 9 equals 40. Your next step is to factor both sides. Well, just factor the left side. It will be a perfect square. You will get the same binomial times the same binomial. In this case, what is that binomial? What times what gives you 9? Added together gives you 6. It's n plus 3 times n plus 3. And then your last step is to take the square root of both sides. And you'll get used to this because what is the square root of this? The whole purpose in that was getting so that this will get away. What is the square root of n plus 3 times n plus 3? N plus 3. And here is the issue. What is the square root of 40? See, there isn't one. That's why it doesn't work out the other way. You could factor it into what? What is this simplified? It's the square root of 4 times the square root of 10, which is 2 times the square root of 10, right? And then, children, actually this is plus or minus. How do I get rid of the 3? I have to subtract it. Now here's the goofy thing. Your answer, you can't put a 3 with this because they're not like terms. So your answer is just C, a negative 3 plus 2 times the square root of 10 and a negative 3 minus 2 times the square root of 10. Those are your answers and I can't change that. But you could not do that the other way. There's no way you could factor that like we did before there. That was exciting. Alexa, what do you think about that? Well, and that's why I said, you must have your instructions in front of you, otherwise life will be rough all over. How about, let me let you try number 16. X squared minus 2x, and it already is solved like it should be, equals 3. Step number 1 was already done for you. See how far you get before you hit the proverbial wall. You would now be on step number 2, where you take half of the middle term, square it, add it to both sides, factor it, solve, jump ship. This one. I wrote it right here. You are solving this one. I don't know what number it is. It looks like it's number 16. X squared minus 2x equals 3. Step 1 was already done for you on this, so you are starting with step number 2. Which color was 2? Blue. Minus. In Japan, they start this in 2nd grade, so. Minus, believe me. You are on step 2 where you take half of the middle term, square it, and add it to both sides. Half of the 2, square it, add it to both sides. You have a question or you give me the answer? Wait for the rest of these people. Oh, that's a cop out. Sammy, what'd you come up with?
I got plus or minus 3.
Plus or minus 3? You should get 2 answers, and I don't know if they both be that boots.
I have positive 3, negative 1.
Positive 2, negative 1. Let's look and see. Again, step number 1 was done. It was already, the number was already there, so you have to take half of negative 2, or it's just 1. Half of 2 is 1. What is 1 squared? 1. So you add 1 to both sides. So you're left with x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 4. The next step was to factor this into 2 identical binomials. It will be 2 identical binomials. What number multiplied together gives you 1, added gives you negative 2? Gary? X minus 1 times x minus 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1, added together 2. Step number 3 or 4 or whatever we're at is to just take the square root of both sides. You'll get, it's always going to be the same. You see the pattern here? You just cross off one of those, you end up with x minus 1. Over here you get a plus or minus 2. And then to solve just for the x, you add 1, the 2 answers you get are once when you add 1 to a positive 2, and when you add 1 to a negative 2. Positive 2 plus 1 is that 3. Negative 2 plus 1 is the negative 1. So you see where we... How did I get 3? Positive 2 plus 1, Smith, is 3. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. Honestly. Evan says 15. Let's do 15. What's wrong with 15? Where is 15? Right side 16.
Still left. It's still left.
To the left of 16?
If you put the box over there, put number 4.
Oh. Whoa, magic.
Oh, it's magic. Let me get you started on it though. What does it say? V squared equals 10 minus 16v. You got to get it in the right form right first, so you need to move this 16 over there so it looks like you just have it. So you should start with this. V squared plus 16v equals 10. That's step number 1. Smith. To get this from one side of an equal sign, I do the opposite. It's subtracting. So I add 16, I add 16. Anytime you cross over that equal sign, you do the opposite. Take half of the middle term, square it, add it. half of the middle term, square it, add it. I square. Follow directions. I'm looking at your directions. Follow your directions, children. Christine says no solution again.
I never said
Rule's having some issues today. I'm starting to think it's not Christian. Alex, you have an answer? Wait, what step are you on and what part confused? You don't know how to take half of 16 squared and add it?
Oh, that's
Okay, you got what? You added 64 to both sides?
That's right, I got it.
Alright, so v squared plus 16v plus 64 equals 74.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
So you don't get the next step, which is to Kelsey, we'll go through it slowly. Half of 16 is 8 squared is 64. Then, children, Alex, what times what? What same binomial times itself is going to give you this? 8. X plus 8 times x plus 8. By the way, a helpful little hint, kids, in case you haven't noticed it, is whatever half of this number is, was the number that ends up over here. Because you're unsquaring it. And then please don't forget, you need to take the square root of both sides. And you'll notice the square root of 74 is non-existent, nor can it be simplified. So you end up with x plus 8 equaling the square root of 74, which actually should be good in your eyes because then you don't have to do as much work. How do I get rid of the 8? Subtract it over. So your two answers are, and you have to write these down, and it doesn't matter the order, it's a positive square root of 74 minus 8, and it's a negative square root of 74 minus 8. Or just, if you put plus or minus there, it'd be fine. But you can't simplify the square root of 74. It doesn't break down to anything easier than that. Although Ryan would tell you that the square root of 74 is close to what number? Huh? Somebody, the square root of 74 is close to 8. 8 or 9. 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 9 is 81. Evan, what's the next one you want to try?
13. All of them.
Which ones haven't we done on this one?
All of them. 14, 9.
How
about 12?
Tell you what, do 6. Do we do 6?
No.
6, 9, and 12. 6, 9, and 12.